actually need a drink because I'm going to get dry mouth. What's happening YouTube? How's everybody doing out there? Today I'm going to compare the Sigma 35mm f1.4 with a Fuji 23mm f1.2. Not exactly two lenses that you might compare to each other that often, but in wedding photography I shoot with a 5D and a 35mm lens all of the time. I almost always have this camera on one side of me and another 5D with an 85 on the other side. And the reason I'm comparing the two is that I'm hoping to switch one day to Fuji, which is way smaller and way lighter than this whole Canon setup right here. It's just going to save me a little bit of wrist pain, and I'm going to be a lot less fatigued at the end of the day. Hopefully I'll be a little faster, a little bit more mobile. Not that the Canon really slows me down that much. But I've already switched to Fuji for travel and street photography or anything else, and I'm just using Canon for weddings now. I did wonder about which version of the 23mm that I might want. The 23mm f2 is cheaper, it has weather sealing, and it's a little bit smaller. Not that the other one's that big anyways, but that's what kind of drew me to the f2. And I very rarely shoot wider than f2 because when it gets darker and I need a wider aperture, I'm probably going to start using flash anyways. And then the other benefit is like its small size would make it great for street photography. I can throw it in my bag when I'm traveling and it takes up almost no room. So what I did was order the 23mm and then set up a tripod and just like recreated a groom prep photo that by the window that like every wedding photographer does, because it makes life easy by just putting the groom at the window, throwing on his shirt. Alright, so let's take a look in Lightroom and I'll talk about the differences that I see in these pictures. This isn't the place where you're going to get the super technical review that tells you all about distortion and like exact sharpness and all these other things that they're going to talk about. I'm just going to talk about what I see and the differences that I feel that the two lenses have. Alright, here are the first two photos. I shot the exact same photo twice but at different times of day. So this was earlier on in the day. The one on the left is the Canon, the one on the right is the Fuji. And straight off the bat, they both look good. And I don't think I would hesitate to deliver either of these to a client. That being said, I almost immediately felt, before I'd even edited them, I immediately felt like the Sigma was the better looking picture. It's definitely quite a bit sharper than the Fuji. Not that the Fuji's not sharp, it's sharp enough, but the Sigma, I mean, you wouldn't expect anything less from this lens because it's known as being super sharp, but the Sigma is definitely way sharper. I hadn't really thought about the fact that the Fuji was a 35 equivalent, and so it was going to have a deeper depth of field than the Sigma is, than the Sigma 35. Still looks good, I just prefer the Sigma at this point. I'm a little bit annoyed that I was standing closer to the camera with the Fuji because I've stepped out of the light that was hitting my face in the first picture, so I'm not getting an exact comparison there. So that might be partly why I prefer the Canon picture, but I'm pretty sure I would have said the exact same thing regardless. I tried to get the colours as closely matched as I possibly could. They're not quite the same, but I'd also say that I had a much easier time getting the Canon file to look how I wanted it to look, although I've been editing with Canon for much longer, so that might well be down to why I had more problems with the Fuji. I don't by any means think that Fuji has bad colour science or anything like that. I just like the Canon one. And as I say, I would have no problem delivering either of these images to a client, but for sure at this point I like the Sigma one better. And later in the day I went back and shot the exact same photo, mostly because I was a little closer to the camera and it was annoying me, so I wanted to try and get one where I was at an even distance. And obviously the light had changed a lot by then, so the pictures look almost completely different. And I think under this different light I was much happier with how the Fuji held up against the Canon. I was able to get them looking much more similar. However, on balance, I still prefer the Sigma picture over the Fuji. And I can't really tell much difference from afar, but it's when I zoom in that I can see that sharpness from the Sigma 35, and I mean I still think the Fuji is a sharp lens, it's just clearly not as sharp as the Sigma. So it's the exact same issue really, it's just much closer later in the day. I would still be happy delivering both of these to clients. Jeez, the sun is just like coming out. Just sorry if the lighting conditions in this video just change. I'm just getting like loads of sun and then it's kind of going away and then it looks bright on my screen and then it doesn't look bright, so fingers crossed it's not like hellish. I'm going to return the Fuji lens just because I'm not fully sold on it at this point. I want to try the 23mm f1.4. I've heard that it's sharper, even though it's a little bit older. That being said, if I didn't already have the Canon with the Sigma 35, I would probably be happy to keep the Fuji with that little 23mm. It saves a heck of a lot of money and it's not that far behind, really, in my opinion, at least in some lighting conditions. So I shot these photos a couple of weeks ago and I already returned the Fuji 23f2. So in the meantime, I'm gonna stick with the Canon until I can try out the 23 f1.4 and see what I think of that. If I was buying a camera setup for the first time, I would probably go for the Fuji over the Canon because it's a lot cheaper for an X-T2 with a Fuji 23mm lens than it is for the Canon, and it's not that far behind. I mean, I don't know, I paid more than double the price for this than I did for this. This is now the 35mm lens, by the way. So yeah, I'm gonna stick with the Fuji for travel and street and the Canon for weddings until such times as I can get a hold of the 23 1.4 and the 56 1.2. And then there's also just the hassle of like selling all your other gear and buying new gear and blah 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 blah. It just gets kind of awkward. I'm probably gonna wait another couple wedding seasons or another, at least I'll get through this wedding season and then maybe think about doing it after that. My god, it's getting brighter and brighter outside. Switch that down a bit. Alright, I hope you found this video informative in some sort of way. As I say, I'm not particularly technical, so sorry if that was a bit of a disappointment, but if you're thinking about shooting weddings or portraits, maybe it kind of came in handy. Any questions, comments, leave them down below. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers!